to interrupt this episode. I hope you're enjoying it, but I want to talk to you about one of the sponsors that make these episodes possible. Today, let's talk about Cryptic Clothing. It is a veteran-owned, patriot-loving, God-fearing company that builds unbelievable clothing and camouflage. If you haven't checked them out, do so at cryptic.com. Check out some of their altitude pieces, which are my favorite, some of the best fabrics, insulating layers. They got no matter what hunt you're going on, no matter what adventure, even if it's just a dinner with the wife, they have the piece that you want to wear outside as well as support in this ever-loving, God-fearing, veteran-owned company. Josh Smith, we're in Frenchtown, Montana, sitting in your headquarters, brand new headquarters.
Yep.
Brand new facility here, new equipment. We did the tour day. Unbelievable what you've done in just a few years. Actually, went from custom knives to producing hundreds of knives and dropping them and having them sell out in 14 seconds or whatever crazy shit it is.
Yeah.
Congratulations! It's awesome. It's a great story. I want to get back to where Josh came from. You grew up in Lincoln, Montana, right?
Yep.
Which is the town of like 2,000.
Yeah, if that. It's a town of about maybe 2,000, or was back then in the summer, and then it seems like it was about 1,100 in the winter.
Okay.
There's a lot of people with cabins and summer cabin type people up there. But yeah, it's a small logging town in the mountains, right?
Still western Montana.
Yep, just right about 10 miles from the Continental Divide. Kind of most famously known for a couple things. One, kind of being right on the edge of the Bob Marshall Wilderness.
Yep.
So a lot of people that hunt or go into the Bob can go up trailheads from there, different places. And then also known for the Unabomber.
Oh, that's why. I was the whole time today. I was like, why do I know Lincoln? Do I know somebody from Lincoln? That's what it is, Unabomber. You kind of look like him. Relation?
Yeah. Well, my this is a long story, but my house did blow up, burn down. So my buddies give me shit telling me I was his apprentice.
Did it really?
My buddies are dicks. Yeah. The last one I had here.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Front door went about 80 feet, but.
Was it a gas thing?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
You didn't do your own gas lines, did you?
Well, did a little bit of work on it that morning and I didn't find the shutoff. And I knew I've been building forges since I was 12.
Right.
I know gas really well. And did some work, shut the tank off, and it was a piece of shit kind of trailer home, and pulled this line off of the stove to get it fixed.
Right.
And my buddies at the power company that do gas fixed this line.
Right.
And I didn't get the gas like shut off for it was like in the subfloor somehow, and I meant to like find that and shut it off, but I got kind of late for work. It was a pain in the ass and blah blah blah. So I threw the gas line in the car and headed out for work, and I was like, oh, I didn't turn that tank back on. Went back, turned the tank on,
not thinking you didn't turn the other valve off.
Yeah, I just missed it. And a couple hours later, our old city foreman's running across the parking lot on the ice in his cowboy boots screaming, your fucking house is on fire. And like all six of us are looking at him like, who's he talking to?
Which one of us is in trouble?
So the whole drive home from work from Missoula, which is about 20 miles, you could see a giant plume in the distance. It's kind of weird knowing that's your stuff. So yeah.
No one was hurt.
That was
just stuff.
No, yeah, luckily just stuff. But
jeez. The house blew up. So Unabomber.
Real dumb tard moment there.
So you grew up outdoors, grew up hunting. I mean, it's probably in your blood if you grew up in Lincoln, Montana.
Yeah, it's interesting. My dad loved to like bird hunt and pheasant hunt and stuff, but we had an excavation business, and we were so busy in the summer. And really, honestly, like fall was, like in Lincoln, you don't do excavation in the winter. Once it snows, I mean, mid-November, it's over. Ground's froze, and it's done till April. And so, honestly, in like September, October, you're trying to make that final push to get everybody's projects done. And my dad was pretty wore out and wasn't really big into big game. He bird hunted a lot when he was younger. And we went pheasant hunting a couple times, but he didn't really hunt. But what was really cool, and I think there's a lesson to be kind of learned from this, is my uncle started taking me just like before I could shoot anything, I would just tag along with him. And I was constantly like asking him if I could go. And so he would take me, but then there was two other guys in town that were just random guys that I think I must have asked a lot about it, or basically invited myself.
Yeah.
But they would take me bow hunting, and like Bruce West, this guy, he taught me how to bow hunt. And I look back on it. I mean, I just took it for granted, like that's just what I did.
Right.
And I look back on it now, and I have kids that was the age I was then. And I think to myself, like, man, I'm not taking any like random kid in town hunting.
Right.
And, you know, by those guys doing that, especially, you know, it's one thing for your uncle to take it, but for just some random guy.
Yeah.
There'd
be a lot of questions right now in this day and age.
Well, no shit. Sadly, that's
unfortunately.
like, oh, you're going to take this little boy hunting.
Yeah.
That's unfortunately, that's where the world's gotten to.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
Back then he was like, and he taught me all about, you know, even the ethics of it, of like, to this day, this has been 30 years later. I don't take anybody like to his spot that he taught me where to hunt in. Like, I don't even know if he still hunts, but like, you know, just that, like, hey, he showed me this spot. Like, that's his spot. The only time I ever went there was with him. You know, I didn't take my buddies in high school. But you know, kind of the unspoken rules of hunting, right?
Yeah.
You know, but it's cool that, like, I look at how much that changed the course of my life later on. And it's the reason I hunt and how I got into it and whatnot. And it's really from just some random guy, like, taking an interest in a kid and saying, hey, come on, I'll show you how.
Yeah. And unfortunately, in the days we live in, you couldn't really, I mean, you could, but you'd have to know the family and type. But it shouldn't be that way. And I think there's mentoring programs out there now, which is unbelievable. And it should be that way.
Yeah.
You know, I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they have a friend that he takes his daughter and her 4 friends, and they go hunting every year, and they do the whole wall tent and cold. And I was thinking, gosh, I should do that with my daughter's kid or friends, because that's how you get them addicted to it. Even though they're girls, that's how you get them addicted to that stuff. And there's a sticker, and Brandon Mason, one of my guys, has a sticker in his office that says, kids that grow up hunting and fishing and trapping don't grow up to rob little old ladies. And it's so true.
Yeah.
Give them a reason to be outside.
It's how I got my kids hooked on it when they were young. Is quite honestly, most of the time they were walks in the woods, but we always started a fire.
Yeah.
And they were just like, we'd always go start a little fire. I'd cook back then a Mountain House meal or something.
A hot dog.
Yeah.
Something.
And they just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And we'd go look for deer. And then it ended up getting to the point where then we started hunting harder as they got older, and then they started shooting stuff. But for them originally, it was just like
a 200-yard walk.
Exactly. And start a fire. And and we're like, they just couldn't believe I was starting a fire in the woods. You know, it was like, are we going to get in trouble? It's like, no, this is what you do.
This is how you do it. Yeah, that's awesome. I do that with my kids in horseback riding. Just take them on, and we don't go very far, a couple miles, start a fire, eat lunch, let them play in the creek, and then come home. And, you know, there's times that they can still see the truck because it's down below us, but that's okay.
Yeah, and I got good advice from a guy I used to work with, because he had kids that were older than mine, and he was like, dude, I made the mistake of he just death marched his kids from the time they could hunt.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's a savage animal hunter.
Right.
But he just death marched them, and they pretty soon his kid was like, I don't want to go. That sucks.
Yeah. That's not fun.
Yeah. And so I set my kids up for success pretty early on, like going out on my buddy's ranch and letting them shoot a whitetail doe, or just made it pretty easy in the beginning. And now they're game for, you know, going hard.
Right.
Which is cool.
I meant to set my daughter up for an easy hunt this year, and it didn't turn out that way. It was 9 days or 10 days of brutal 9 below zero, sitting underneath a tree during the buck when the buck season was open. Couldn't find a buck. All we found was doe. During the doe season, all we found was bucks. It was just I was like, the game and fish is against us.
How old is she?
12. She just turned 12. But on the 10th day, last day of the season, she had basketball, and so I was pulling her out of practices and just trying to get it done, and finally ended up getting it done. One of her proudest moments, which is really cool. When you get a 12-year-old kid, a 12-year-old girl to put on in a desktop of her cell phone, it's her photo with her doe.
Yeah, she's proud of it.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yes.
So that's awesome.
Yeah, the first animal I shot with one of my kids, my boy, was I think he was either 4 or 5. I think he might have been 5. I shot an elk with my bow, a cow, and he was with me, and we were sitting in a blind just on my buddy's field. And he was like, oh, go ahead and go sit in that blind. The elk come in once in a while.
Right.
And I thought maybe we'd have a chance for a deer, and late in that afternoon, all of a sudden you hear these elk bugling, and they're just getting closer and closer. And my buddy was sitting in another blind across the field, and he was texting me, and he's like, dude, there's like 150 elk coming right for you.
Yeah, this is going to actually happen.
I'm like, no shit. And pretty soon, yeah, a cow hops the fence. You know, we couldn't see him. They were all behind us, and all of a sudden she hops the fence, and she's 25 yards from us. And the bulls were hanging back. They were hanging back there, and I was worried we were going to get busted. And Hank's sitting there at 5 years old going, shoot. You know, he didn't care about bull.
It doesn't matter. No. I just want to see blood.
And I was like, oh, my God, am I really? Oh, yeah, I got to shoot this cow. You know, but it was all about, and he remembers it today like he's going to turn 15 next week. 10 years later, he remembers like it was yesterday.
That is awesome. And addicted to it now.
Yeah, and, you know, and addicted from then on, like, game over.
Yeah.
And I will say, I've said this before, and I would challenge any hunter to go ask their kids this. My kids are super into sports.
Yep.
They have been from 4th grade basketball on, done all the AAU stuff. They've played every sport. They're basically in sports 12 months a year.
Yeah.
And I asked my boy, and they're good at it. I mean, my daughter's got a full ride scholarship, and Hank's a 6'3", 8th grader that's good. And I asked my kids this. I was like, what's the best game you've ever played? Like basketball. What's the best game? Football, basketball. What's your favorite game you've ever played? What do you remember? Which game do you remember? And all of them were like, well, I don't know. Like Hank was like, well, winning those championships. I'm like, yeah, well, that's a season.
Right.
Like what game?
Yeah,
what specifically? Game. He's like, oh, I don't know. They kind of blend together. And so then I started asking him, hey, that buck over there on the wall, that buck there, these antlers here, tell me about that hunt. And they can remember where we, like year by year, where did we park the camper? Where did we hunt? Where did we hike into? How many days was it? Which field? I mean, Hank remembers the rancher's name, like that he sees once a year. Like all these things, they remember every detail of the hunt. And that says a lot about what hunting is for, like, and does for kids.
Yeah.
Like it's an imprint on them that is forever.
Isn't it interesting? Because you know, just thinking back on my own, I can remember. You know, I look at a mount. I've had people ask me, why do you mount, you know, this animal to animal? Because it's a 3D photo, and when I look at that deer, or that elk, or whatever, it is an imprint of that hunt, and I can almost smell the smells. I can feel I can tell you what the wind was doing. I can tell you if it was sunny or rainy or whatever. Every single one of those animals. Isn't it interesting that is an imprint way more than a basketball game or a soccer game or whatever, because it's so much more dynamic.
It is. I actually feel bad at times because, like, I can't remember my kids being young as well as I wish I could have.
Yeah.
Like when they were little kids, or
yeah.
I have some people that, you know, they're telling stories about their kid doing this and that, and what they said, and I'm like, man, I just remember it kind of as a whole. I mean, a few little things, but every one of their hunts, me and the kids both remember like every detail.
Right.
Which is really cool, which actually makes me kind of regret and wish that I wished I would have pulled them out of more sports. Like early on, especially, it was kind of like, nope, you're on a team. You got to play. You got to be a good teammate.
You committed to this.
Well, you're a goddamn 4th grader.
Yeah.
Like who really gives a shit?
Yeah.
Like it's not like you're saying, oh, you can stay home from practice because you don't feel like right today.
Exactly.
No, it's like, no, sorry, we're going hunting.
Yep.
I know you want to go play basketball, but we're going hunting. Yep. And we did that last year with Hank with his elk in New Mexico. And that there's one thing only that Hank would miss football season for, and it's to hunt.
Yeah.
Like that's it. You know, he would play football if he was puking his guts out, you know, but hunting is different, which is pretty cool.
And be able to pass it on, that's huge. And then, you know, have them pass it on to soon, hopefully at some point, grandkids, and that's
hopefully not too soon.
I hear you.
But yeah, so anyway, we got off on a tangent there, but that's how I got into hunting. But you know, kind of that point of like, man, if you have somebody in town, if you have a little kid that's buddies with your kid, maybe doesn't have a dad, or maybe his dad doesn't hunt.
Yeah.
If he's asking you 100 questions about hunting all the time,
yes,
you know, talk to their parents maybe and say, hey, do you mind if I take Johnny? And you know, especially in those situations where you kind of know the family a little bit, or
and if it's one of your kids' friends, it's easier, and it's great for your kids to have someone to share that experience with, because they'll remember that forever.
Right.
Both of them.
Yeah. Yeah, and you might only take them a few times, but that might imprint so heavily on them that down the road they figure out how to do it on their own.
Yeah, or they go back to it.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah.
So grew up and moved to Frenchtown.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously, how did you start building knives? You were a custom knife builder for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Which is like 2 or 3 knives a month kind of thing? Or what
Yeah,
is custom?
yeah.
What's different? What's custom mean versus what MK's or Montana Knife Company, MKC, does now?
Well, and there's different levels of customs. I mean, you can make pretty simple hunting knives, customs, and make them pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, when I got to the highest level that I was at, they're super fancy, super ornate, lots of forging, Damascus steel, lots of time sitting there hand sanding and filing and finishing and, you know, working with different like fossil mammoth ivory and all these pearl and all these different things and carving and, you know, soldering gold. And so like a lot of those knives can get so ornate, you can sit there and carve on a handle for a week.
Wow.
You know, so, cause those knives, you know, they were up $4 or $5 grand a piece, you know, so you're making a piece of artwork, frankly.
Right. Yeah.
Functional art. But yeah, as far as how I started, my Little League baseball coach started teaching me when I was 11. He was an outfitter in the Bob Marshall, and he would bring hunting knives. He had really only just started making knives a couple of years earlier, so his knives weren't great yet. He was learning. But he would bring knives to practice and show the other dads that were into hunting.
Yeah.
And so I was super, you know, asking a million questions about them. And so my folks bought me one of his hunting knives for Christmas that year, and then he invited me up to his shop to make one.
Oh, that's cool.
And I made 1 or 2 up there, and then pretty quickly he was like, hey, if you want to be a knife maker, you got to do this in your own shop, which I think was his way of saying,
get out of my shop.
Beat it, kid.
You've learned all you can. Get out of here and go do it yourself.
So I had a lawn mowing business and worked for my parents in their excavation business, so I had a little bit of money, and then I would also be in debt to my parents a lot where I'd keep a tally. So I'd buy like a belt grinder, and it was like, you know, $500. And so then I would work hours off, and we would just keep track of my time. And then when I got something paid off, I'd go back into debt. And so I started putting equipment in my dad's, you know, equipment shop. And pretty quickly, like a year in or so, he was like, hey, you're making like a big mess in here. So, because the grinding handles and blades, it makes a big, dusty mess. And so
if you don't have, like you were saying, if you don't have the
dust
right
collection.
So
he enclosed a lean-to kind of out back, and kind of gave that little 10x10 lean-to spot for me, and that's where I started like getting serious about making knives in there. And I would still take the knives I was making up to Rick's house that had taught me, and he would critique them and tell me I'm doing everything wrong, and then I'd go back and try and do better. And that went on. And what I didn't know was that Rick also was about to embark on this journey of being one of the best knife makers in the world 20 years later. So what was cool is I wasn't just learning from some backyard guy that like didn't get good. You know, he wasn't great when I started learning, but I was always like trying to catch him and the guys that I was learning from, but they were always trying to catch the guys they were somewhat learning from. Right. And it just, we all kind of just took off.
So you said the best knife maker in the world. What is that critiqued by other knife makers? Or, I mean, there's not a competition, I would assume.
No, I mean, it's definitely subjective, and I would say it's like, it's totally subjective of like who's the best knife maker in the world. And I wouldn't say that there's one, but there's definitely, like back then, there was definitely a group of guys that you look to that like, I don't know who's the best, but that dude's in that group.
Oh, so it's like everything. The best mule deer hunter, the best, doesn't matter. They all know each other, and it's a group.
And also guys do different stuff, different ways. Like, hey, this guy's knife and this guy's, they don't look the same. Like this guy does tons of carving and all this ornate stuff, and this guy does amazing Damascus work, and that guy does something amazing on his stuff and makes folding knives. This guy makes fixed blades. Right. But like they're doing it at the highest level. And so, you know, there was a group of guys that we were learning from that were kind of old masters that were unbelievable. And then, you know, as we got better and better, you know, the guys I was learning from, you know, like we kind of started to move more into that class of like, like, hey, you're becoming pretty damn good, like nationally recognized. And really how you kind of somewhat judge that is like, you'd go to knife shows and like, how fast are your knives selling and how much are they selling for? And are people buying them and reselling them and making money off of them?
Right.
And stuff like that. Right. So like you can kind of judge it from, and there are awards for knives. Like when you go to the Atlanta Blade Show, you could present your knives to a competition. If you make a hunting knife, you can enter in the best hunting knife category, the best folding knife category, and all those. So, you know, if there were awards that guys were winning in certain categories, that was like, at the biggest knife show in the world, he won it.
Right.
Like
that's so there's a competition.
Yeah. So I mean, it's subjective, but you definitely can put yourself in a class where it's like, okay, that guy's a high caliber.
So you guys are making here at Montana Knife. They're not custom knives. Would it be considered production knives?
Yeah, production. I would say like semi-production. I wouldn't say it's full-fledged like China style stamped out stuff. Like,
I mean, I was down there and you're hand sharpening them. You know, the blades are hand sharpened. They're being
hand
finished,
blasted, parkerized, cleaned by hand. Like, there's definitely processes in like major factories, especially overseas, where pretty much everything is all just entirely robot from start to finish, and there's not like handwork involved. And so ours are, but yeah, I mean the whole goal of this was like, kind of to spin forward. I was making these custom knives, and again, my knives were $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 a piece.
Right. And
I'd have a guy like you come up to me at a baseball game or basketball game for my kids and be like, "Hey, I want you to make my boy a knife for Christmas." And it's like, it was a real struggle because like, if I'm going to charge that guy what I need to like make money on what I'm doing, this knife's going to be $800-900, $1,000.
Right.
And, it's like, well, I don't want to buy my 14-year-old $1,000 knife,
Yeah.
And so, I was getting this pretty good reputation of being like one of these better knife makers in the country, but then I wasn't able to really build knives for the guys I hung out around unless usually what I did was like call it a loss and charge them half. But it wasn't sustainable. And I was also going into stores and seeing what was available to the hunting community.
Right.
And it was really bothersome for years. I'd walk in there and I would look at the knife counter and I'd pull knives out of it and I'd see the edge geometry and the design, and like, there's not a hunter that's designing this stuff. There's like an engineer that's like, somebody came to that guy and was like, we need to make a hunting knife. Yeah. Okay. And they went to their computer program and they like, that looks like a hunting knife, and they make it. And there wasn't a lot of thought, one, on the hunter side of what the hunter really needs, and then two, on the knife maker side of like, that blade does not need to be that heavy, that thick. It's bad edge geometry. The steel selection maybe isn't right. And I felt for years like I could do this better. And I did not see a single knife company out there that was marketing to hunters that actually had a hunter like leading that brand.
Yeah.
Or even really very involved at all. And I've learned more about some of these bigger companies, and I'm not going to say name names and whatnot, but like I've heard some really big name companies, and I know a couple of people within them that are like, yeah, there's like 2 dudes in our company of 600 people that hunt.
Right. Yeah.
And let's face it, a lot of these companies are based out of Portland, or they're based in places that maybe there isn't just a lot of hunting opportunity anyway.
Right. Well, and the other thing, I think it's not just knife companies. I mean, we work with a ton of brands across hunting, and there's a ton of companies that aren't run by hunters, and it's saddening. There's a ton that are, and I always encourage people, know who you're buying from.
Yeah.
And you guys are a great example of that. Know who you're buying from and why, before you get caught up in the price or caught up in the trinkety colors or whatever. Know who you're buying from and why theirs is different.
Right.
And you guys do that. You're a hunter. You're in Frenchtown, Montana. You have 14 or whatever. It's got to be 14. I made that up. I don't know how many employees you have, but
close to 20 now. But
okay,
so, but probably like 14 here.
Yeah. And so you have, you're growing and you're semi-custom, but those knives, you can tell, well, some guy is building that specifically for somebody that's going to use it in the field, bushcraft or hunting or whatever.
Well, and I make the knife in my shop. Like I hand make the knife, I hand grind them, and I do all that stuff. And then when we go to put it into production, I'm miking like the thickness of the edge, the thickness of the spine throughout the knife, and then that's what we set the grinding specifications to. So
that's why it's semi.
It's not like I'm not custom making each one of those knives downstairs, but they're made to the specifications of that knife that I made. Probably a dozen prototypes of the Blackfoot before I launched MKC, and then we computer mapped that knife and made it. So like how it feels in the hand, right? Like it's one thing to draw it on paper, and often I find myself, I'll draw a pattern and I think like, that's really good, I like that. And then I cut it out of paper, trace it on a piece of steel, cut it all out or forge it out, grind a handle, and I'm like, it's just like a fuzz too short, or there's this sharper point or edge or something that's digging into my palm, or whatever. I don't like the way the angle of the tip or different things. And so those are the things you're getting with us of like when I come out with a hunting knife design, like I use knives. I'm also listening to guys. Like I don't necessarily agree with every hunting knife that's out there as to why you would or wouldn't carry it, but that doesn't mean that the guy that has an opinion on it isn't wrong, and there's not a ton of guys that agree with him.
Right.
Like, hey, I like a knife with a really, really big belly and no tip, right? Like, I want a skinny knife for doing this or that. Well, when I hear enough comments in a certain direction, I'm like, okay, I need to make something that like is for that crowd.
Right. Yep.
But then I need to make something for the next guy that's like, no, I want a nice tip on something. I want to be able to cape out my buck and haul it out and whatever. So, a lot of the stuff is feedback from our customers, and with these knife companies out there, it's funny how they'll have a hunting line. Go on their Instagram and tell me how many dead bears you see on there, how many dead elk.
Right.
Like there might be like a little bit of hair in the corner of a picture, or there might like
one drop of blood.
Most of them are hiking pictures.
Yeah, absolutely.
Show me how many and not that like you need to have a grip and grin on every photo, but like. We're also not afraid to post a picture of a dead elk.
Right.
And like, okay, are they really a hunting company, or are they just trying to act like it, but they really don't want to piss off their little woke lefty crowd over here? So it kind of gets under my
It's a knife company, though.
Right.
I mean, God.
And that's
not
why
even allowed to be on Facebook, really.
That's why we say, like, well, we can't. We've been trying to run Google Ads now for the last few months. Brandon's been trying to figure out how to buy Google Ads or to do that kind of stuff. Instagram ads. We can't do any of that.
Oh.
And, but we also make no bones about it. We are a hunting knife company. And, yes, we're working on developing a folding knife, and we do culinary and all this other stuff, but we're Montana Knife Company. We make hunting knives. That's our core,
right.
And we can't forget that. But, yeah. And I, while I was making these custom knives, I kept seeing this and I kept thinking, Montana Knife Company seems like it just like popped up out of nowhere, because it definitely, we've kind of blown up. But I registered the name Montana Knife Company with the state of Montana when I was 19.
Oh, so when you were making custom knives, it was under Montana Knife Company?
No.
Okay.
It was just under Josh Smith Knives. But I registered the name Montana Knife Company when I was 19, because I knew someday I wanted to have a hunting knife company. I wanted to start this brand, and I talked about it with a friend of mine for 15 years. I'm sure to the point that he just thought I was full of shit, because he was a marketing guy, and he kept telling me, like, because he had a hunting knife of mine, and I made a few prototypes for Montana Knife Company back in like 2008, and I showed him, and we did some testing and stuff, and he's like, dude, like, you got something here. And I wasn't ready personally in my personal life. I was about to head into a divorce. I had young kids, and I wasn't financially there. And I was like, I only get to try to start this company one time.
Yeah.
And he kept trying to get me to start it, and I was like, dude, I'm not ready. And we talked. I talked with my lineman buddies in the bucket truck. Dave Kennedy and I. He helped at a couple shows this year. He was down at Western Hunt and whatnot. I hired him to just come help out. He was my foreman when I was a lineman, and we would sit in the bucket truck, and we talked about Montana Knife Company for like 5 years before I started it.
So you were building custom knives before you were a lineman?
Yeah.
So you transitioned and going, okay, this custom knife thing, how did that happen?
Yeah, I started full-time into the customs when I was like 20 years old or so. I went to college. I worked for a year. I duck hunted my way out of college. So I moved to Missoula in 2002 and I went to work for an excavation guy. And then that fall when we closed on our house, the next day I quit my job and I became full-time maker. And so I did that up until like 2009 or 10 in there when the economy was going to shit.
Yeah.
I was seeing how fragile $5,000 knife customers can be.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it was like, yeah, I'm going to wait on that knife. My stocks are, down 50%.
Right.
And all of a sudden my 3-year backlog was like, I was kind of like starting to really worry. And also if you listen to the news back then, I mean, it's a shocker, but like the news was making it sound like it was the end of the world.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy shit, I've got
End of the world that happened for 9 months.
Right. And so I had young babies. And I was just like, and I was teaching a buddy of mine to make knives then, and he was a welder for the power company. And he's out here, paid vacation, 401k. Like,
you're like, you go home at 5 o'clock and you don't have to do anything?
He's like, dude, I'm getting paid $45 an hour right now, and I'm out hunting with you. And I'm like, I'm out hunting here and I'm losing money every second I'm doing it.
Right.
So,
and I'm worried that I'm not, even when I get back, I won't be making any money.
Exactly. Now, when I get back, I'm going to have to work next weekend because I took this weekend off. So,
right.
It definitely, I was seeing like, wow, I want a stable job like that.
Yeah.
And so I ended up applying and I got a job actually on the gas side as an operator operating backhoes. And then I kind of read the room and all the linemen were old. And I was like, okay, I can see where this is headed. So I switched over, and sure enough, the next year I got an apprenticeship. And I went through a 3.5-year apprenticeship and became a journeyman lineman.
Yeah.
And during that time, I also got divorced. So I had 4 kids, apprentice. My house blew up. It was basically a super sad country song. It was like you couldn't write this shit. So I was living
Dog got ran over.
I parked an RV right in front of my old shop there, and my kids and I lived in that all summer while I built the house I've got.
Oh, my gosh.
As I was an apprentice. And so I didn't make much for knives there for a couple years because I was basically like come home from work and do laundry and feed kids. And it was a struggle. And it was kind of that way for a few years. And honestly, what changed is, I can't remember what year it was, 16. I met my new wife, Jessica. And we started dating. No, that was 2000. When did Trump run? Yeah, 16.
16.
I remember because I met her right before, like, we went on our first date the night before the night of the election.
Oh, wow.
And I remember asking her, she was like super cute. She was the school teacher. She seemed to have her shit together, but I'm like, I know what's going to ruin this. I'm like, who do you want to win tonight, Hillary or Trump? And I was just waiting for her to say Hillary. Yeah. She goes, I don't know, but I hope that bitch Hillary doesn't win. And I was like, wow, let's get married. So
what are you doing tomorrow?
Yeah. So we started dating, and when we got married, what really was a game changer for me is I was telling her, she's like, why don't you make knives more? Because I had just been on that show, Forged in Fire, on TV.
Oh, yeah.
And she thought that was really cool, and she's asking me, like, why aren't you making knives? And I'm like, well, when I do it, I have this idea, this knife company I want to start. And I explained to her, it's Montana Knife Company idea. She's like, well, you should quit your job and do that. And I was like, slow down.
Wait.
Yeah. And she was like, no. She's like, you need to do this. Like this, because I explained my whole vision for it. And she could tell I had thought about it a lot. And she's like, nope, I've got the house. I got the kids. When you get home from work, you're in your shop and like make this happen. And so I started building in 2019. I started building prototypes for MKC 2018 and 2019. And in this February of 2020, I took the first prototypes I'd made to Bert Soren's to Winter Strong to show around, and there were some industry people there.
Yep, that's the first time I wasn't there, but that's the first time I saw it. Was Glenn Eberly was telling me about it.
Yep, met Glenn there, and I took those prototypes there. I was still a lineman, and I told everybody kind of my idea, and that crew of people was just super supportive. They were like, "We're behind you. You should do this." And when you hang out around people that are all that accomplished and amazing. Yeah. You come home and you're like, I got to get my ass in gear. Like, it's amazing. That whole like if you want to be an eagle, don't hang out with the chickens
Yeah.
thing.
It's the sum of you're the sum of the people you surround yourself with.
Yeah, and I changed everything from then on. I was just like completely driven towards that, and honestly, it was crazy because when I came home from that, when we flew out there, COVID was like this whisper.
Yeah.
A few days later, it was like in the news, and a week later, shit was hitting the fan.
Right.
And so I came home from that, and I told my wife, I said, last time the economy and the world was falling apart, I like changed course of my path. I'm not fucking doing that this time.
Doubling
down. And we went into it as if it did not exist, and went hard at making more knives and getting the first run of Blackfoot's done. And I met Brandon, my business partner, had him, build me a website, and I started realizing how good he was at marketing. And finally that fall, I told Jess, I'm like, I need a guy like Brandon. We can't afford to pay him. So I offered him partnership in it. And I was like, hey, if this thing goes, then we both do well. But I offered him, significant amount of because I needed him to be all in.
Right.
And so he was like, all right, let's do this. And he had just quit his job, starting his own marketing firm.
Oh, okay.
And he started putting more and more time into MKC. And by January 1st of 21, on January 1st of 21, or actually it was December 30th, I quit my job. And we were kind of both like all in. We didn't take a paycheck for half of the next year. And so half of 21, we were just cranking.
Nice.
And it was just 1 or 2 employees there in the spring. And through 21, we just built up. And
Today's episode is brought to you by Silencer Central. Now, if you haven't used a suppressor / silencer, they're the same thing. If you haven't used them hunting, you need to. I've recently did this, and I am on board fully. Before Silencer became one of our sponsors, I was on a couple of hunts where they were using them. Here's the advantage: follow-up shots. Not only do you get that one surprise shot, you also get a second one because that animal isn't scared of the noise. They may have felt the impact, but they didn't hear the noise. Check them out. It is unreal. They are building silencers specific for hunters, lightweight, short silencers that you can put on any gun. I had an amazing conversation with Brandon Maddox, who is the CEO, founder of Silencer Central. Check that episode out, as well as check silencercentral.com and let them know that Ike sent you, and get set up today.
That's awesome. One of the interesting things I didn't know until today you were talking about, as we're walking around your facility here, is, they're building. You said, oh yeah, we're building up to drop on Thursday. I had always assumed you had a drop, meaning we came out with more knives, or in the production for no more knives. Let's pre-sell them. You guys don't.
no.
So what's the philosophy there?
Yeah, I can't stand when I order something and then people hold my money, and then especially if they then miss a deadline. And I think I saw in the custom knife community too many really bad things happen with deposits.
Yeah.
And I had it stuck in my head. I saw guys take deposits with the best of intentions. And, you see outfitters do it all the time.
yeah.
And pretty soon they're living off of next year's orders, and then the next year, and all of a sudden.
Robbing Peter to pay Paul constantly.
And that I was just like, that was never going to be our business model. And I was like, I am not going to sell something until it's ready to ship to the person. And it's proven to be an amazing thing for us because people are shocked when they buy it Thursday night. All but maybe 2 drops have been all shipped the next day. And a couple of them were so big that like we finished shipping them on Saturday morning.
Right.
But Monday and Tuesday, those knives are arriving in people's mailboxes.
That's awesome.
And so a lot of people, if you're in Montana, they ship Friday. Some people are getting them on Saturday, and they bought them Thursday night.
So you have a set number that you can, okay, we can produce X amount by this date.
Yep.
By Thursday, and then Thursday night you sell that. And once you hit, we're going to sell 150 or 300 or whatever. Once we hit 299, turn it off, and that's it.
Yep. And we just enter the quantity in the Shopify site. So we preload the quantity we have. So like, hey, this color, we have this many, this color, this many.
Yep.
And then it automatically, when it goes to 0, then it says sold out.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And that way we just don't run the risk of letting anybody down.
Yeah.
And it's also, to me, like when somebody buys something, they're excited about it. They want to get it. And I don't want that excitement to wear off. I want it to build.
Yeah. 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 You're right. In our society today, the I call it the grocery aisle. We walk up and, the impulse buy. We as Americans are really unique in that, actually. Or we'll impulse buy vehicles, big purchases, knives, or nothing compared to, my wife's in real estate. She's seen people impulse buy houses.
Go for an oil change and they drive a new truck.
A while, 100%. And so it is that instant gratification is awesome, and it has to be that way.
Yeah, and it really allows us to plan then, because like, okay, we know we have this amount of knives, and then if we have a problem and we're like, hey, next month we're gonna drop 300 of this, and something goes wrong, somebody gets sick, and it's like, shit, we only got 250 done.
Right.
Oh, okay, well then we'll drop the 250, but we don't have 50 people now upset that we missed a date.
Yeah.
So
what's the future? More knives. Obviously, you're coming up with, what you said, 15 different knife styles.
That's about what we have right now. But yeah, it's actually interesting because as far as we've come, I really feel like today, like moving into this building in the last few months, we're really actually just starting now. Like, you saw the garage we were in. I mean, like that, it was almost like fake it till you make it, and we were just getting by and doing our best in there. And now we have a building we can still grow, we can expand, we can hire more people in, we can add machines. But what's so exciting is that we've just only scratched the surface. Like, we have a few knives that we tried out the culinary thing, and it was a way bigger success than we thought it would be. And so we're ramping that up. We're going to be adding more culinary knives. We haven't even started into the tactical space, the self-defense, tactical, military, that whole side of it. That's a whole division we want to start. We haven't started our folding knife division yet. At least publicly, we haven't. We have that in process, and I'll actually show you some stuff after this is over. But we have a folding knife actually working right now.
Oh, cool.
We're developing though a new lock. So we're testing it right now. We're prototyping it, but we have to then buy the equipment and figure out how to build all that. Like, it's a whole nother ball of wax when you have a folding knife. And so, and then the hunting side, honestly, the knives I made, I just was like, okay, I need a knife that's, we had a Blackfoot, and then hey, how about a super lightweight version, with the paracord? And then, hey, a lot of guys are telling me they want a bigger knife, the Blackfoot's not big enough. So I came out with the Stonewall, more of a skinning style, right? Or, well, how about a bigger drop point hunter with a super cub? And then Cole Kramer was like, hey, I want a knife for fleshing bear hides. And so that's an example of listening to our customers.
Right.
And we came up with the bear tooth. Honestly, a lot of people, I can't believe how many, but they're using it in their kitchen. Because how many guys really flesh bear hides for a living?
Right.
But it's amazing how many taxidermists got those from us, and guides. And when we came out with that, I didn't think we'd sell very many. But I really did it just because Cole was like, this would be rad. You need to do this. And but that's an example. I even told in our board meeting last week, I told our guys, not every knife we make, we're going to sell thousands of.
Yeah.
There's going to be times we make a knife just because a certain small segment of a maybe a lineman knife, a wire skinning knife.
Yeah.
Maybe we're going to make a wire skinning knife for electricians and linemen, and we sell however many we sell, but it's not going to change our bottom line at the end of the year that much.
Yeah.
But it's I want to be a legitimate knife company and make knives for people that actually use them.
That will be using them, even if it's a small segment.
Yeah.
Even if there's only 300 people skinning bears.
Right. Right. And because as we found out, that bear skinning knife, people are found other uses for it. Or maybe that lineman wire skinning knife, all of a sudden paramedics can use it for cutting seatbelts or something.
Yeah.
There's things like that. So, we're going to take our hunting division now and start doing some variations of the knives we have, and then adding more stuff in. We've got some people that we've signed that we'll be announcing that are pretty cool, that we're going to be working with some special designs. And so honestly, right now, the goal is just to continue growing it.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I love the story behind the custom side. And we have in my family custom knives that have been passed down generations. My kids will end up with one that my grandfather bought in the 50s. That's cool, but not everybody. They're those knives you're not using every day. The cool thing about your knives is you want people to use them, and they're built to be used, not built to be put on a shelf like some of the custom stuff is. So obviously more knives.
Yep.
How many do you have people? You talked about people going, like Cole Kramer. I want a bearskin and design, and here's what. So you have those coming out. You have folding knives. I mean, there's no limit to this, I assume. You could get into axes, you could get into hatchets, you could get into all kinds of custom steel, right?
We have a hatchet half done right now, but I'm struggling with one part of the process, so it's on hold, but I'm going to be playing with it over in my custom shop to like figure out how to finish it. But you're right. I mean, you look at all these other like big brands out there, knife companies. I mean, sky's the limit with how much we can do. And I feel like we can do a lot of it better or different.
Yeah.
None of these other knife makers, I mean, or none of these other knife companies actually have a knife maker that like runs them. I mean, you know, I'm not trashing, but like Gerber's owned by Fiskars,
Right, which is a Finland company.
I mean, so it's like, Montana Knife Company is owned by a master bladesmith. Like I got my master smith stamp when I was 19. I was the youngest in the world to do it. I mean, I feel like that gives us some credibility on the knife side. And I'm not honestly trying to grow to the size of like, I don't plan on I'm never going to take, production over to China to get bigger or whatever. Like if we get to a certain size and it just seems like that's where we plan out, but like I just want to be super reputable and credible as a company. And if there's a certain, like the hatchets, we get to a certain point where we're struggling and we're not getting there, like I'm not going to just release them or sub that out to China or something like that. So even the folding knife stuff, Brandon and some guys have asked me like, okay, what's the date? When can we say we're coming out with these? I'm like, you're not getting a date. Like, because we have to make sure we do it the right way.
Yeah.
And if that takes 6 more months to get figured out, or if it takes 18 months, we won't come out with a folder until I can put it in your hands and be like, check that out.
Yeah, that's the best I can. That's
the best we can do. And I feel like if it's the best we can do, it's going to be the best in the industry.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So you said you're master smith when you're 19. What does that mean for the guys that are not in this, which is most of my audience? What does that mean?
Yeah. I joined the American Bladesmith Society when I was 12, and to become a master smith, you have to join the American Bladesmith Society and be an apprentice for 3 years.
Under
a knife maker. Yeah. And you can do it in your own shop, but you have to be, essentially you're a paying member, but they assume you're learning from somebody. Especially back then, there was no YouTube or internet. If you were learning to make knives, it was probably from a person.
Right.
That's definitely different these days. But once you're an apprentice for 3 years, you can test for your journeyman. And the way that works is you first have to make a performance blade first, and it has to chop a 1-inch rope in half, which just shows that you can make a blade that's sharp in one chop. Then you have to chop 2 2x4s in half, and it still has to shave. And as many chops as you want, you hack through it like you're using a hatchet.
Right.
And it still shaves. And what that shows is that you have the control over your heat treat, that you can make a blade that if you're hitting knots in the wood or whatever, that your edge isn't going to chip out or deform. And you chose a steel and you heat treated it correctly to where it held an edge long enough to do all that and still have an edge. And then you have to take that same blade and bend it in a vise 90 degrees without breaking it.
And that's just for your journeyman.
That's just the performance portion of your journeyman.
Wow.
And so what that shows by being able to bend that blade is it shows now you have control over your heat treat, and you didn't make the blade too hard, it would have snapped. You didn't make it too soft, it would have bent up in the 2x4. And then when you're done with that, you have to take 5 knives and present them to a panel of judges in Atlanta, Georgia. And the master smith judges, and they judge the fit and finish of your knives. How nice are they? How well did you construct those knives? And so I did that when I was 15. And then you have to be a journeyman at least 2 years before you can test for master. I was in school and whatnot, and I wasn't ready when I was 17. So when I was 19, I tested, and I did the Mastersmith portion. It's the same test, but you have to do it with a Damascus steel blade, 300 layers of Damascus. Do the performance part again with that blade. And then you present 5 knives again. One of them has to be a Quillian dagger, which is just a really difficult knife to make. It's easy to screw up.
Mm-hmm.
And they judge you more harshly. Yeah, it's a dagger blade. It's a 10-inch dagger.
Okay.
So double edge.
Okay.
It has to be symmetrical. That's the thing about a dagger. So, hey, it's cool you did it to one side. Now do it to the other and make it the same.
Same. Yeah. Duplicate it.
Yeah. And so I did all that and passed that when I was 19. And I always say, like, it's a really cool thing. And it was definitely an accomplishment. Was I a master at 19? Like, no. I mean, I don't think you can be a master of anything when you're 19. And quite honestly, even today, like, there's so much more I want to learn and do on the custom knife side. I think it really just signifies you get to a certain point in your career that you're really, truly a professional knife maker.
Yeah.
But you also see guys, they kind of like sit back after they do that and they don't do any more. And 20 years later, they're nowhere near the top of their game compared to their guys, because the whole world keeps progressing, right? Like the knives guys are making today compared to 25 years ago, you know, there's just more information out there. You know, back then I had to travel. When I was 14 or 15, I flew across country and spent a week with George Heron in his knife shop. Like, he was an old man that was a famous knife maker back there in South Carolina. And I just spent a week there learning from him. And that's the kind of stuff you had to do back then because there was no YouTube.
Right. So at 19, how many knives did you have to build, or did you build before that final knife that you got tested on? I mean, it's got to be hundreds.
Yeah, I'm sure I built couple hundred at least, several hundred. Yeah.
For the journeyman's and probably the masters.
Yeah, I mean, before I got to that point, yep.
And you'd obviously put them through your own test to make sure that they would pass.
Yeah.
You go, oh, that one's. So you say control your steel, or control your heat. Walk us through what does controlling your heat mean?
Well, knowing your heat treat. So knowing, okay, this is the alloy steel I have. So now I have to know how to heat treat that. So what temperature do I need to take that steel to?
Because every steel is different.
Every steel is a bit different. And what temp does it need to get to? How do I measure that temperature? Without going way too hot and kind of burning up the steel? And then what do I need to quench that blade into to harden it? Is it water? Is it oil? What kind of oil? And what temperature does the oil need to be? And then also, once you do that, that blade is too hard. Once it's quenched, it's like a piece of glass.
Okay.
And so that's when they say, like, hey, I temper your attitude, right? Bring it down, right? So that blade's too hard. You need to temper that blade. And when people say, like, hey, what do you temper your blades at? A lot of times they mean heat treat and how are you heat treating?
Yeah.
But a temper is actually a part of the heat treating process. So you have to temper that blade. So you put that blade, say, at 400 degrees in the oven twice or 3 times for an hour. You take the Rockwell hardness from 67 or 8, to 58 or 60. Okay. And so what that does, it's an inverse scale. If a blade is super high Rockwell, it's a low toughness. And what toughness is like that flexibility, that give that it has when you pry on it.
Okay.
Right? So really hard, not very tough. So if we heat that thing up to like 400 degrees and you start bringing the hardness down, the toughness starts to rise. And now what we want to do is we want to find this nice balance where, hey, it's still hard enough to put up to a knot in a piece of wood or to hit up against a bone in an elk and not bend the edge, not leave a dent.
Right.
But if it's too hard and you hit that bone, the edge might chip out.
Okay.
Right? So we want to bring that down, and now we have that nice balance. Now, if I'm making you a bushcraft knife, I don't care as much about how long the edge will hold, like you would as an elk hunter. You want it to, like, hey, I want to get through this whole elk, right?
Yeah, right.
I'm more worried about, like, I'm going to be prying with this knife, right? So our speed goat or our Blackfoot, those aren't made to be pry bars. I'm more interested in, like, can you get through an elk? Can you get through a couple deer or whatever with that blade, right? So with a bushcraft knife, you might even bring that hardness down more and raise that toughness even more, to where I know you can pry on that thing. You can, like, if I'm sending a knife overseas with a guy and I know he's going to be trying to pry hinges off of a door,
Right.
you want a great example that's like a spring. A spring, actually, if you just put a sharp edge on it, wouldn't hold an edge for a long time. It would do okay, but you're not breaking it.
Yeah.
That thing's tough as hell, right? That's what's made to do in the car. It's just to
Constantly
flex
move. Yeah.
back and forth.
Yeah.
If it was too hard, it would just crack.
So that it brings a, depending on what the knife is, it's tempered differently. So your hunting knives are hard and tough. You want that balance. Whereas
Right.
a bushcraft, they're not as hard, but they're tougher.
Right.
They're more like spring.
Right.
So when you sharpen, this is really where I was headed for this. How can you sharpen it differently, or do you have to sharpen those knives differently if they're hard, if they're like the bushcraft knife versus the Speedgoat knife?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's kind of my problem with knives at a store that I've seen is, if you use the right steel and you heat treat it correctly, you can actually get away with making that blade thinner. And a thin blade is a couple things. One, it's gonna be lighter to carry.
Yeah.
Right. So if that steel, our Blackfoot blade is 120 thousandths thick. Our Speedgoat's only 100 thousandths thick. That's really usually, like, a lot of the hunting knives I see in the store is exactly half. A lot of them are like 200 thousandths thick. Jeez. Right? 225 thousandths thick. So by having a thin blade, you also can sharpen your blade at a lower angle, which puts less pressure on the edge, right? So, like, it's more like a razor going through an elk or a deer, and you have less resistance, less pressure on the edge as you're moving through it. So the steeper the angle and the more thickness behind that edge, I'm using my hands here for people that are just listening, but, like, if there's a bunch of material right behind the cutting edge, that now makes it harder for that material to just pass by the edge. It puts more pressure on the edge, and it also makes it hard for you as the user to sharpen. at a slighter angle. So now you have more of a steep angle. So now a steeper angle might be great for, like, a wood chopping, like, bushcraft knife, right? Because the thinner that edge is, also kind of the more brittle, potentially, right? Or the more potential chance of it breaking. So that's where, like, with a Speedgoat blade, and we'll actually do this. I'll show you. I was actually talking to Henry about it. I'm going to shoot a video. You can test a blade with a brass rod, and you can press down on the edge, and you'll see our Speedgoat blade flex up. And when you let off, the edge goes back.
Really?
Yep. And so what that shows is I can make that blade super thin, and that edge will give. If it comes up in contact with a bone, it's like, oh, like, kind of hits that bone, it flexes over, and it comes back, right? So a lot of these companies are actually marketing like, oh, our blade is 65 Rockwell. It's hard as hell, right?
Yeah.
Well, it is, but then what they have to do is they have to make the blade and the edge thicker.
Otherwise, it doesn't.
Otherwise, it's going to chip. And so now, also, when you go to sharpen it, you got to remove all that steel behind that edge. You know, so if you're just trying to do a little touch-up on it, or even if you're at home on your sharpening stone in a garage, you have a shit ton of material behind that edge to remove. I'm making our edges as thin as possible, saying, hey, man, this is not a pry bar. Like, if you're going to be a dummy, you can break it. And if you do that, we'll send you a new one anyway. We're gonna back it up. But I would rather...
Wait. So you have a guarantee that I can't break... If I break it, you'll send me a new one?
Yeah, we've done it several times.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of one of those things, like, I try to tell people, like...
Don't be stupid.
Yeah, but if you're trying to pop your elk ivories out and use a Speedgoat tip and you pry on the elk ivory, like, you're going to break the tip off.
Right. Use a rock and a stick.
Right. But what I would rather do is have the other 200 people that bought that same knife go, holy shit, this is light, and it just goes through hide and hair and meat.
And when I touch a bone, it doesn't ruin it.
Right. And so I would rather occasionally just send a guy a knife here and there and say, hey, man, don't do that.
Yeah.
Then you know, because that's kind of like bad PR, right? If our knife, it happened with Andy Stumpf. He was with a couple guys, and he's bragging about our knives. and his buddy Denver like went and tried to like pry something with the tip, and he snapped it, and then Andy was giving me a bunch of shit, you know. And it's like, it's embarrassing, it's like bad, but it's like, honestly, and he admitted, like, yeah, and I tell people, like, carry a goddamn screwdriver if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
But the point is like, knife companies don't want that bad press. So instead they make their knives, essentially they try to make them unbreakable, which ends up making them, for the other 99% of people, less useful tool.
Right.
Like, it's like, I would rather just learn how to take my ivories out the right way and give me a knife that's like the best tool for the job, you know? And so anyway, that's what we do with with the sharpening, for example.
We're talking about sharpening.
Get me back on track. When you do make a blade that is like for the dude going to Afghanistan to pry hinges off, or the guy that's going out and chopping kindling and just doing a bunch of bushcrafty stuff, then you do want to steepen that edge out to maybe more like 25 degrees, right? Where our speed goat might be like 17-degree edge. So it's a steeper angle, less of an angle. But with a bushcraft, the more you turn it into like a wedge, like an axe, right? An axe is much more like this, and when it goes through a piece of material, it's driving that material apart,
right,
under force. It's actually pushing that. That's why a splitting maul works better than an axe on a big piece of wood. One, you have weight, and two, you have an angle on that splitting maul that's forcing that wood apart.
Okay. Or
an axe is more slicing through it, right? Like a thinner knife would be. So, when you're sharpening, I prefer a slighter angle, like a 17-degree angle on like a speed goat and whatnot, because it's also much easier to touch up. If you grab your cheap little diamond out of your pack and you just want to do a quick touch up and go right back to work, you don't have all this weight and heavy steel behind the edge causing you issues to do that.
So these sharpeners that you get that are, permanent angled, that wouldn't work on yours because those are 22 or 33 or whatever. So it's not going to be the same. So you need to take a stone.
It's best if you use a stone. I mean, the angles will work eventually, because what'll happen is you'll reshape that edge to that angle. They'll work. Most of those I'm not a fan of, and most of those wear out pretty fast. And you have one contact place on that diamond. So you're not using like a whole stone. You're using one tiny contact place, and those things wear out super fast.
Okay.
So I prefer a stone, like I carry a little small flat diamond plate in my pack. Generally I leave the house with my knife sharp. So like, I'm probably not going to have to touch it up in the field, but if I am, that little 600 grit plate or 1,000 grit plate is going to be all I need for a quick touch up to get through. Then at the house, I tell people it's nice if you have a bigger bench stone.
Yeah.
To do, maybe a little bit more serious sharpening there.
Still 1,000, 600, 1,000?
Yeah, 600. 600's a good grit.
Do you guys sell those?
We do. Yeah, okay. We have stones online. We're actually developing a new sharpener with Worksharp right now.
Oh, cool.
Actually one for the pack, for your hunting pack. But the other thing I tell people is, learn how to sharpen. You can go to our YouTube and learn how to sharpen and whatnot. But also, with our knives, if you just send it back to us and just fill out our little generations form on our page, we'll resharpen it and send it back to you for free. And like if it's a speed goat, we'll rewrap the cord for you, we'll resharpen it, and we'll send it back to you.
So do that like once a year. Have you guys?
Yeah, and that's what I tell guys, like in January, ship us your knives. And if you send it on a Monday, most likely you're going to have it back on Thursday or Friday.
Wow.
Because it's Tristan's job downstairs every day. His first job of the day is to go get the Generations knives that came in the day before and go take care of all of them and ship them that day.
Oh, that's awesome.
So if your knife arrives Monday, it leaves the shop no later than Tuesday. If my wife happens to get the mail like Monday morning and we get it, it might go out the same day we receive it.
Wow. That's really good. So you guys are touching them up once a year for free, ship it back to them.
Yeah, or however many times. If you want to send it in 3 times a year, I don't care. Because I would rather stand behind it. I would much rather you say, I'm going to send you my knife after Spring Bear, and then I'm going to send it to you midsummer, and I'm going to send it to you again in December. I would rather somebody do that, and every time they go in the field, that thing is absolutely as sharp as
Perfect.
possible, and they're having a great experience with it. Because I would way rather that. I'd rather that guy spend $5 on postage to get his knife back to us, and for me to be able to sharpen it and send it back, than him be like, I'm struggling to sharpen, I can't figure it out, and then he ends up with just another knife. And you end up with, like we all have had, a drawer full of knives that we don't use.
Yeah, because they got dull and we could never get the edge back to them.
Right.
Because we're all idiots. I am.
But I would rather just sharpen that for people that don't want to take the time to really learn and get it right. Like, just send it to us. A buddy of mine once told me, he's like, dude, you're going to go broke sharpening knives for free for people. Like, you need to charge them. I'm like, dude, if I'm sharpening that many knives, it means we've sold a lot of knives.
Yeah.
And they're using them. Like, I'll take that. I will hire a guy and I'll pay him a salary for an entire year. And that's just our maintenance program guy. And that's all he does. Like, to me, that's a win. And that's kind of the advantage too of, like, we price that into the knife. There's a margin in there specifically for that.
Right.
You know,
and so I've heard you guys talk about struggle, or not struggle, but people complain about the price. They're American made.
Right.
All of these amenities, sharpening for life. If you break it, we'll replace it. That all comes with a price, but you buy quality, right?
Right.
And that's what you're selling.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Hunters are funny that way with knives, because this is what would drive me crazy is I would go in Sportsman's Warehouse and I'm looking at these knives in the cabinet and I'm seeing $19 knives or whatever. And I see a dude rolling by, and actually in like Sportsman's in Missoula, the knives are right at the optics counter.
Right.
So I see a guy, he lives in western Montana, he hunts elk, he hunts in North Face timber most of the time, and he's buying a $3,000 Swaro spotting scope.
Right.
Or binos or whatever. And he's also bought himself a custom long-range rifle and, you know, a nice new loop-holed scope for that.
And $15,000.
And he's hand loading for this long range. Again, he hunts in the farthest he can probably ever see in this timber is 300 yards. But he's doing all this stuff, and then he's going out and he's buying all this high-end camo,
right?
The base layer and the mid layer and the rain gear, and he barely gets 2 miles from his truck. But he's buying all this high-tech gear, and so he's wearing $2,500 worth of clothes.
Or more.
He's buying $400 boots. He's spending $10,000 on his gun between his optics and whatever. And he went and lifted his truck because he needs to get through the mud better. And, you know, like all this stuff.
Let's not go down the road of the camper and the ATV and everything else.
Right? All of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he buys a $19 knife. And if you leave home and you forget your spotting scope, if you forget your binos, if you forget pretty much everything, but you take a weapon and you shoot something, the only other piece of gear you're really going to need is a knife.
We say it all the time. It is weird. Hunters do not plan for success. They don't. 100%. They're like, I forgot a knife, or I don't have game bags, or where is my knife? I thought I had a knife in here.
Exactly. And that's why it's funny. We put our knives on our pack strap. I like them to be accessible and whatnot, and there's arguments for that and whatnot. But one of the biggest reasons why is when I walk into my shop and I grab my pack and I go to walk out, that knife is on it. I can see it.
Yeah.
And so if I forget anything, if I forget my jet boil or whatever, like I got a knife and I got a gun.
Yeah.
I can hunt.
Yep.
Right? Like I can hunt. If I forget my
tag, you got to have the tag.
If I get out of my truck and I'm like, damn, I don't have my boots, I'm only wearing tennis shoes, like I can probably make it work, right? But a tag, a knife, and a gun, we're good to go.
And a bullet, at least one.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right, 100%. And we don't, for whatever reason, don't plan for success, and we've talked about that. The other thing is, guys, I don't think you can have too many knives. I really don't. I think out of all the gear that I have, that's the thing I have multiples and multiples and multiples and multiples of. I'll have a knife. Sometimes I've shown up to, a kill sign. I have 4 knives. Like, I wonder where that one was.
People apologize to me. They're like, "Hey, man, sorry, I've got a Benchmade in my pocket," and I'm like, "I don't give a shit. Like, that's fine. Like, if you like that knife, that's great." Like, I grew up being taught by knife makers, and collectors would come to shows and they'd buy a knife from me, and they'd buy one from Rick, or they'd buy, and I'd go to a show and John, who bought a knife for me at the last show, comes to this show and he buys a knife from Rick and not from me. And it's not a big deal. Like I think people should collect knives. They should collect guns. Like if you like this knife over here, that's great. Like buy that. So I don't have any problem with that. And back to the American made thing with the knives is, we're employing people in our community. We just donated $5,000 to the local rodeo for the rodeo sponsorship stuff this summer during the fair. We're sponsoring stuff for the school. My girls' softball team is Montana Knife Company. Like all these things you do locally, veterans events, right? Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation stuff, the Mule Deer Foundation stuff, like different things you do. And we're trying to do as much as we can with the size company we are. And then we want to grow and do more.
Right.
Supporting the Wild Sheep Foundation stuff we did this winter.
Not to mention employing Americans.
Right.
Who are spending their payroll in America.
Yep.
Doing American things. Going to the rodeo.
Paying taxes and doing all that. And, the knives that are being made overseas, like, when was the last time one of those companies sponsored your kid's softball team?
Right. Yeah.
Or bought your kid's 4-H pig.
Yeah.
So that's the stuff like we want to go to a 4-H, fair here locally and buy a beef or buy a pig. And we want to do stuff locally. And then we also want to then do stuff on the more national side. Yeah. So,
yep. That's when we were at Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation this morning, walked through their new visitor center there, and you have a display case where you can buy their knives. And the guy was really helpful. Wanted to sell me all of them.
Yeah,
it's like I just wanted to look. I've never seen all of them in one place, which was really cool.
Yeah,
to see the different blade sizes and handles, and
it's great having that because, as you've seen here, this is located on my personal property, so we don't really advertise like, please don't just come drop by here. People do, but it's great because we can drive people to that location.
Yeah.
To buy a knife if they're driving through locally, and then it also benefits RMEF, so it's kind of a win-win.
And you actually built them their own specific knife, right?
Yeah, well, we just
saw a sign for there's 100 of them or something.
Yeah, we lasered just 100 RMEF ones for them. Yep, for their grand opening. And
so, can you buy your knives like Sportsman's Warehouse, or is it all consumer direct?
It's all direct.
Except if you go to REMF, apparently.
Yeah, it's all direct. I mean, we got a couple spots around the country. Barney's in Alaska's got them up there, and the Sitka Depot's got them in Bozeman. I mean, we just got a few places like that, RMEF, but no, it's pretty much just on our website. I mean, we're trying to grow and capture our own customer base, and quite frankly, we can't meet our own demand yet, so it would just create probably
a bigger headache.
A bigger headache. I mean, I'm not going to say never, but definitely not for a while.
Well, if you're selling 300 knives, to get them in all Sportsman's warehouses, that would be half, and that would be one knife.
Right.
It'd be half of your production. So
yeah,
well, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's helping us scale because then we're keeping that margin and we're able to reinvest it in the company. And I mean, that's the goal right now. Is it's just pure growth.
Right.
Like grow this baby as fast as we can, but in the right way. So,
well, I appreciate it. So, two of my questions, one of the easiest one, and we've kind of talked about it, skirted around it. Why do you hunt?
That answer's probably changed over time. I mean, the last 10 years, it's been entirely to show my kids like the just how amazing hunting is. It's been all for my kids. I mean, I've killed a little bit of stuff, but in the last few years, but like every single year for the last number of years, I've gotten my kids a deer. My daughter shot an elk when she was 12, like opening rifle morning, and Hank shot a bull with his bow last year. Hunting is the only reason that a lot of us see the country that we do. Like, we live in an amazing country, and the only reason my kids have ever seen the Missouri River breaks is because we hunted there.
Yeah.
And if you don't hunt, why would you go to some of the places we go? And I think our country and our landscape, Mother Nature, the rivers, the mountains, all this stuff, like, it's just so incredible to me, and I want to share that with my kids. And there's no reason to go northwest of Jordan, Montana for 50 miles on a dirt road. But when you do, and you come over the hill and you're looking out across the breaks down into the Missouri River bottom, you're like, and then you start talking to your kids about Lewis and Clark and like telling them like these sons of bitches paddled upstream.
Yeah.
Like in a canoe, and you start talking about all that stuff. To me, that's what's so amazing about hunting. And then, you know, throwing that back to just where we came from as a people and not losing that. And I want my kids to be able, like raising their own beef, raising their own pigs, knowing how to raise chickens, knowing how to even do some of their own excavation. I taught my boy how to drive dump truck this weekend, you know, and how to shift a dump truck and like how to shoot a gun and be, you know, to just be capable where your meat comes from. And I look around the country, and when I travel as you do, it's like you walk through some of these neighborhoods or these places, and it's like most of those people, including adults, have no idea about any of this stuff.
Yeah. Would have no idea how to run a chainsaw, how to sharpen a knife, how to load a gun.
And how to be respectful too. You know, so many people call themselves environmentalists, and to me, I think hunters are the ultimate environmentalists. Like we have like the most to ride on here. The most riding on our environment is like if we ruin our environment around us, or we do something to poison it or to mow it all over or whatever, like we don't have a place to hunt anymore.
Right.
And nobody that I've been around truly actually really cares about animals and the environment more than the guys I hunt with.
Yeah.
And there's times where we as hunters are like, yeah, I'm not shooting any mule deer does. Like, I'm not going to take any mule deer out of here because the numbers are down, or I'm not even going to put in for an antelope tag in that area because I know the numbers are down. And most of these people that profess to, you know, claim that they're environmentalists don't even know shit about the antelope numbers.
Yeah.
You know,
never even seen one except for in photos and video.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. The best motivation is a selfish one, and hunters are selfish in the sense that they want it to continue for generations.
Yeah.
Often I hear people say that they hunt because of their kids and they want to pass that down. It's a tradition. It's also meat procurement and all the other things, but it's really about sustenance and passing it to the next generation.
There's just a list of advantages of it that the camaraderie side, the like getting out of cell phone service and having to just sit in the camper at night in the wind in Jordan or in a tent.
Yeah.
And just talk to your kids. I mean,
the best conversations happen that way.
Right.
100% agree.
Yep.
So what's Josh Smith going to be thinking about? God willing, you have the ability to know when the end is coming. And what are you going to be thinking about on your deathbed?
Probably I wished I had gone hunting more.
Boy, I wish I'd have sold more knives.
Yeah. Definitely won't be that. It'll definitely be like, man, if I already think to myself, and my kids are still young, but like, I said it earlier, I wished I would have pulled them out of some more sports or whatever and gone hunting more. Like, those memories and whatnot, like, I don't think you can ever have enough of them. So no matter how many more I have, I'm sure I'll wish I had even more.
Yeah.
And also just, I think I'll be sitting in that situation with a ton of gratitude, because I'm like incredibly lucky to get to, you know, I was born to the parents I did that taught me how to run backhoes and excavators and just give me the freedom to go learn knife making from a guy in town. They didn't stop me or worry about, is it dangerous or is it whatever? Right. And they sent me on the road to go to knife shows in Oregon in the back of a Cadillac car at 14 with knife makers. And like, I got to do really cool things and learn a lot of things. And then throughout life, like having 4 great kids and then getting to hunt and then ultimately carving out a way to make a living doing and being involved in the industry that I love so much. It's, gratitude. I mean, there's nothing, like, you know, it's interesting. People have asked me like, hey, you going to build this company up and sell it? And this company's becoming worth some money. And in a few more years, you could sell it for whatever. And I'm like, I would way rather pass my kids down a really cool knife company than a whole wad of cash. Like, I'd rather pass down something that they have to make a living in and, like, keep it going. And if you screw it up, then there'll be consequences for that. Like, I don't care if I'm ever, like, super, super rich or whatever. Like, what I'm getting to do right now is the actual American dream.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, I went from, you know, a knife maker to becoming a
poles.
lineman and climbing poles and working in storms to meeting a girl that gave me the courage to, and, you know, and some other people to give me the courage to, like, launch this company, to building manufacturing knives. And I had no idea how to manufacture shit.
Yeah.
I still Google stuff every night. Like, I don't know how to be a CEO. I'm like, the fuck is EBITDA? So, you know.
It says dust collection. What the hell does that
Yeah.
mean anyway?
Yeah, what was that CFO? What was he talking about? So, you know, like, everything I'm doing is I'm just a regular guy, and I'm just, like, figuring it out as we go. But, like, honestly, it's and we bootstrapped it. We didn't borrow any money. That was the one thing I said, like, I won't take a paycheck for 6 months, but I'm not going to borrow any money, because I already was feeling guilty that by quitting my job, that's a good job.
Yeah.
And I was quitting that, like, somewhat putting what I wanted to do ahead of what was probably smart at the time. You know, so that was a risk. But to take that risk, to bootstrap it, to, you know, take the money we earn from these knives and build more, and then take that money and build more, and then to kind of be building what we've built, that's really the model. I'm just going to keep going with that. But, like, ultimately, by the end, like, whatever that ends up being, like, that's the American dream.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's really cool. I've you know, my podcast is a little bit different in the sense that I want to know people's stories, and everybody has a cool story. You have a really cool story, and, you know, master smith at 19 and how that works. And, you know, I've interviewed the guy from Silencer Central, Brandon Maddox, and how he started that, or Adam Weatherby, you know, the Weatherby story, all these fun stories. One of the things that I see, a common thread of course, is always hunting and why. And almost always people hunt for unselfish reasons. And that's what you are. You're hunting. You want to hunt because of your kids, and you want to be thinking about your kids and the next generation when you hunt. That's awesome.
Yeah. I hunting, to me, like, I've never shot anything myself that I've been anywhere near as excited as when I've been, even without my kids, just with friends. Like, I bugled a bull in on that mountain that we shoot cannonballs at.
That's a different story.
Yeah.
Josh Smith has a cannon he shoots bowling balls out of.
But I bugled a bull in. I saw that bull from my kitchen, and 8 hours later, I'd bugled that bull into my buddy shot it at 6 yards. It was his first elk with a bow. Like, I could not have been more stoked. Like, just the fact that he, you know, it all worked, and he got that bull, and, like, saw how excited he was. Like, I would not have been as excited if it was me than it was, like, seeing that all happen and helping him do that.
Just being a part of it.
I love it. And honestly, we raise beef. I have beef in the freezer. I'm not a hunter that, like, needs the meat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my Hank and Macy's cow elk that they got last year, we put both of those in the freezer here in the shop for the employees to just take home when they want it. A lot of them hunt. A lot of them didn't get anything last year, so at least they can take home some meat occasionally when they want to.
Yeah.
But so I don't necessarily need it. To me, it's more like, and there's been plenty of times I've been out in the field and I've had an elk at 10 yards, and it's just a small guy or whatever, and I just passed on it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily because I'm, like, this, like, trophy hunter, but, like, that experience of getting that bull to that, like, I won.
Yeah.
I got him at 10 yards, dead to rights. Like,
there was only a few more steps, and
I didn't want to pack that bastard out. So
I really didn't want to sharpen my knife again. Is really what it was.
Yeah. So I let him walk, but that experience of, like, and also think about how cool it is where we live, where you and I right now, we could stop this podcast, we could load all our shit up, and in 30 minutes we could be at a gate.
Yeah.
And we could go hunt. And, you know, if this was hunting season,
you could be bear hunting right now.
We could be bear hunting right now.
Yeah.
But 3 or 4 hours from now, we could have a bull coming into you, and like, think about where we live, that's possible. Yeah. That is not, and I tell my kids all the time, like, you guys won't realize until you travel more, until you're older. Like, you got to live in a place where you would ride the bus home, get off the bus, we'd throw everything in, and an hour later we're hearing elk bugle.
Right.
And we're hunting. Like, Hank shot a bear last year, my 14-year-old, with his bow right behind the house here. He hiked out by himself, went down to the river, and he was trying to hunt deer down in this timber back behind us. And 9 o'clock in the morning, he calls me. He had gotten up before I was up, before dark or before light. He left from here, and he had been going after a buck back there.
Oh.
And I just envisioned it being like, you know how like when you're walking through a field and pheasants are just flying? That's how I envision his whitetail hunting back there. It's just deer just running everywhere and him walking around with his bow. And I'm like, all right, bud, go deer hunt.
Good luck.
Like, good luck. I'm sure the guys back there that have tree stands back there are like, son of a bitch. Here comes that kid again. So anyway, but he calls me at 9 in the morning and he's whispering. He's like, Dad, can I shoot a bear? And I was like, if it doesn't have cubs, yeah. Hold on. And he puts his phone on speaker and sets it down, and I hear whack. And he just starts yelling. And I'm like, what is going on? Because I asked him, I'm like, how far is it? He goes, 10 yards.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. And
He's on the ground?
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
And I was like, yeah, you better shoot it. And he's like, hold on. He puts it down, and I hear that bow go off, and he starts yelling, oh, my God, oh, my God. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? I killed it. And he shot this black bear with his bow last year by himself, 14-year-old.
Oh, my gosh.
On the ground. Like, it's pretty cool where we live that's possible.
Yeah, that you can do that.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Hiked out from his bedroom and shot a bear with his bow. Like, that's the shit legends are made of. Like,
yeah.
in 75 years from now, and he's telling a grandkid that, they're going to be like,
you did what?
Seriously?
You can do that? You could then.
You could back then, kid.
Yeah. Yep. That's cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you the hospitality you guys have, and putting this up, and inviting us, and everything you guys are doing. It's been fun to watch, and I'm glad we're going to be a little bit part of it. And
for sure,
it'll be cool.
No, I appreciate it. It was awesome hanging out with you guys down at the Hunt Expo this year, and
we'll do more of that for sure.
Reading your magazines, and it's just like to just even see our stuff in like Eastmans magazine. It's just like unbelievable, It's really cool. So
it's a cool industry, and it's filled full of cool people. It really is.
Yeah, and that's what I've learned. I mean, if I've learned anything, it's a lot like the knife world I grew up in. The only reason I got so good as a knife maker so fast was because knife makers were willing to like teach me,
you.
And like it was a family.
Yeah.
And we were all selling knives at the show, literally competing against each other right next to us. And we were all
going to dinner and driving there together and
all of it. And guys would literally bring, a collector up to my table and be like, hey, Bill, this is Josh. This kid's doing pretty cool stuff. Check it out. And like sharing their customer with me. And I would do that with people. And like, yeah, I'm sold out, but hey, there's a guy over here that's got really like cool shit he's doing. You should come see it.
Yeah.
And, for me, the hunting industry has been, I want to somewhat try to remain Switzerland from the standpoint, like, we make knives. I want everybody carrying one of our knives, you know, but like, I've met people from, there's amazing people in all these brands, and you realize they're just like normal people that work for, these cool brands. And it's been just an honor to be a part of.
Yeah. Oh,
so
cool.
Honored to have you guys here. It's super cool that you came up.
Yeah, it's fun. It worked out. Weather's beautiful. We haven't had this. We haven't got this kind of weather yet, it's nice to see.
Yeah,
it does exist.
It was shitty yesterday. You timed it perfect.
We were in Missoula yesterday. It was shitty. It's raining.
Yeah.
I looked over at Brandon. I said, "Did you bring a raincoat?" Nope. I bring a puffy.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, man.
Hey folks, thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You got to hang out with some of the people that I think are the most interesting I've ever met. And remember, fair chase is the only way to hunt and take trophy big game. See you next time right here on Eastman's Podcast Edition.